A new patch has dropped on the Formula 1 game here today, and it's a pretty big one. There's 3 key features which I think you guys are going to really like, and we're going to basically break down the patch notes and also showcase these changes in game to see how they look. So leave a like if you're going to enjoy, subscribe for more as I'm very close to 85,000 subs guys, and let's get into it and let's see what's new. So first of all, before we jump into the game, let's quickly run through the patch notes. Number 1, visual F1 sports update to close and match the real season. As you know, this is a fancy way of saying the car models and the car liveries are mostly up to date. You know, if teams have brought upgrades in the last 2, 3, 4 races, you're not going to see them in the game yet, but most of them will be there. Like for example, the Tyre, which has a new nose, I believe from the Japanese Grand Prix, or maybe the race before that in Singapore, that isn't in the patch because that was too recent. But for example, the Mercedes has the new halo, the Red Bull has this new paint finish, and you know, other cars like the McLaren have the new side pods, you know, etc. We'll jump into that in a minute in the actual game, but for now let's talk about the next one. Portimao and Shanghai are now available in Season 2 and beyond in career modes. That again is a small detail but goes a long way. If you're doing a career mode, once you get past the first season, Portimao and Shanghai are raceable. You can bring them into the rotation and basically swap out circuits and race on whatever you prefer. So big bonus there, happy to see that. The only thing I would say is I do hope it has to happen down the line, whether it's, you know, next game or whatever, but it has to happen. We need to have fully customizable calendars where we can change everything around however we like. But I do believe there's an issue there with in terms of how my team and the kind of card development works for the AI, I believe. Either way, that aside, number 3, the big one for me, added an option to allow the player more flexibility in tyre selection per session during a race weekend. Essentially, it's the return of the softer, balanced or harder compound, so you can choose what tyre allocation you want for the weekend. There was a bit of a debate about this because the way the new tyre rules work this year, that hasn't really been correctly applied in game this year, and the tyre allocation was still there, but you couldn't change anything. It was completely locked and grayed out. So this is going to make things really spicy. I think also for the last esports event, this could be potentially pretty awesome as well. So I do like the look of this, and I think it's going to make online racing a lot more fun, league racing as well. So we'll test it out in a minute. Number 4, added support for NVIDIA DLSS number 3. This is big because I use NVIDIA DLSS, which is essentially when you can't run, you know, maximum frames on PC, this is basically running a lower resolution version of the game that's been upscaled to a higher quality. So it allows for higher FPS, and I use NVIDIA DLSS because I have an NVIDIA graphics card. So I will be testing this out and seeing if it's indeed a better performance in terms of what I had before. Updated and improved delta times when using immersive safety car feature. I didn't really have an issue with this beforehand. I don't exactly know what that means. I'm guessing it's just going to be a bit more smooth, a bit more consistent. The delta could be quite erratic sometimes and bounce around quite a lot, so I hope it's a bit more smooth and easier to kind of calculate and manage. Then we have some, you know, minor features. I'd say those 5 are kind of the big ones that are actually going to affect me in the way I run the game. After that, we have an update to Häkkilän's helmet, which is minor. Liam Lawson's flag has been updated on his car in Formula 2. I believe there was already a problem with Liam, I think it was him, at the start of the game when he had an Australian flag instead of New Zealand. So there was obviously still an issue there with the actual car itself. The griddy has been fixed, where essentially it showed out of world instead of the podium, which I had. I'll leave the footage on screen now, but I did a my team race at Monaco, which I won, and I installed the griddy and I got a picture of a wall and a tunnel. So yeah, good to see that's been fixed. Then we have an issue where in certain circumstances players could receive a jolt to their wheel instead of a fading feeling to force feedback, which I have had myself personally. It's when you go to track or when you learn to a session, the minute the kind of AI control goes away and you get full control of the wheel, it would kind of snap like that, and then you kind of get this, the force feedback to work. So hopefully that's been fixed, which it says it has, so it'll be a lot more smoother and things will just be nice and you won't have to snap your wrist to catch your car. And then after that, very minor, fixed a water droplet issue with the TV pod camera on the Alpine where it didn't show them. Again, that's very minor. Then we've got telemetry fixes, various minor fixes and stability improvements. But now let's talk about the tyre allocation option, which is point number 3 in more detail. So as you can see, you will now have the choice of weekend tyre allocations between 3 set options: softer, balanced, harder. While tyre compound totals for a race weekend have not changed, these options adjust the distribution of tyres within each session. These allocation choices will allow for greater strategy diversity, including multiple stints on the same tyre compound during a race session, such as medium, soft, medium strategies, while ensuring that players have enough tyres available to complete a race. Additionally, only soft compound tyres will be permitted for use in qualifying sessions during race weekends that feature sprint races as per real world regulations. I completely messed up. Real world regulations. We value your ongoing feedback, and we still look to expand the way tyres can be allocated throughout a race weekend for our future titles. So yeah, there you go. Essentially, like I mentioned, there's been an issue with recreating the way the tyres work in real life, and it was greyed out. Tyre allocation was still in the game, but it wasn't, accessible. So they haven't replicated real life with this, but at least they've given us the option to have some flexibility. Like, for example, to do a race and only have one set of medium tyres. Quite a few times in this game I've been in trouble because of that. Canada springs to mind. Canada has always been a two-stop race, and you do kind of like a medium or soft medium, or like a medium soft, and you're not able to do it. Or you have a race where you maybe have a crash or something happens, or there's a safety car, you have a chance to get back into the race, and it turns out you've already used your hard tyres and you've only got fresh softs remaining. You don't have a medium actually available, or you get put on your old medium that you already use, which is a problem. So good to see this happening. It's going to add a lot more, I think, to racing, and it's going to be a lot more fun for all of us. So big fan of this change. So here we are in the F1 game, and we're now going to talk about the visible changes on the liveries. Now, one thing I want to mention really quickly is I'm going to just talk about the key features that spring out to my eye to each team. I'm not going to go through each small detail, just the things you guys are going to notice when playing and seeing the cars on track. So first off, we have the Mercedes, and this is of course a car that I'm going to drive quite a lot because I use it in league racing. So the first thing is the front wing. You look at the outside of the end plate, it's had a massive cutout, which is essentially their new wing they were kind of running in Mexico, which has been a little bit controversial, but you can see we have a massive cutout. You can see the actual bottom of the winglets. We also have a bunch of winglets on the side pod just before the engine cover and underneath the mirrors. And then besides that, the other visible change for the Merc is a few livery adjustments and the halo, which is a big change. So Mercedes are the only team that have a halo that has lots of kind of layers like we used to see before the current generation of car, and that has been updated. Besides that, it's just a livery change as well with the paint. For example, the rear wing has a lot less red on it, again to kind of cut down on paint weight. So yeah, the red has been reduced. But yeah, a nice change to the Mercedes, big fan of it. The chrome seems a little bit more noticeable as well, which I like. So yeah, I'm looking forward to driving this car actually, and all of its changes. Wow, finally, what a difference. Red Bull, this is what I'm talking about. The paint before, I don't know what they've done with the paint, but it looked off. This is more like it. Whatever they've done with this one, this is spot on. It's darker, more bluish, and very metallic. Big fan of the change to the Red Bull and the livery. Also a few tweaks to the actual car, design. The chassis, the side pod's been a bit more refined with a cut in the side pod there. Also the side pod inlets have been brought forward a bit more, you can see there with the wings. So a few details added, but the main thing with this car is the new paint finish and the darker blue, which is a big bonus. Ferrari, not really a massive change with them. The only noticeable one you're going to see, especially from onboard, is the mirrors have been changed. So we now have the updated kind of mirror design and the arm that connects into the car. That's the only really kind of visible one that I can really notice, besides maybe some sponsor adjustments and some small changes to the livery. So not a massive adjustment on the Ferrari. McLaren is a pretty big one. They have their new title sponsor, I guess OKX, you could call them a title sponsor. Chrome added to the top of the engine cover, and also their new side pod design, which of course replicates Red Bull, and you're going to see a kind of trend with that with Williams later on as well. And then just a few small changes to the livery, some sponsors, a small tweak to the front wing as well, I believe. But yeah, McLaren, mainly I'd say the new side pod design is kind of their new feature, along with their new title sponsor. As you can see, it features pretty prominently on the rear wing. Next up we have Alpine, and for them their big change is the side pod. Very aggressive design, taking a leaf out of kind of Ferrari and Red Bull in many ways, and yeah, it's basically just shaped a lot more aggressively, and also it's been brought forward a lot more with some black paint. You can see in the mirror section, and you're going to notice that quite a lot from the onboard of the car when you're driving it. So yeah, you might have to also redo some of your camera settings maybe for some of these cars if you start to drive them. But yeah, the Alpine, some small adjustments as well to other sponsors I can see on the car, but the main one is that entirely new side pod design, which is really aggressive and very different. Then we have a small adjustment thing on the front wing as well. You can see it's got a little bump in terms of the design. It's like a M shape almost. You can see it kind of dips in and out. AlphaTauri, now this one's interesting. I believe the car chassis is pretty much the same. They have recently changed their nose, so it doesn't have that bump underneath anymore, but of course that was a recent change in Singapore, so that hasn't been patched in yet. And this is my team car. I based my chassis on this. So for me, I'm looking forward to seeing this because there's a lot more sponsors on the nose, which is going to give me a lot more opportunities to kind of modify my livery, and also the sponsor locations. Like for example, on the outside of the front wing, we have 2 sponsors there now. Also on the rear wing, we have 2 as well, which is again for my team livery. I can make these changes. We've got the new Buzz sponsor, which is on the side of the car there, and that also features on the inside of the rear wing. So all these things I'm looking forward to testing out myself when I update my team livery with this chassis. So yeah, I also think the AlphaTauri, the blue or the black, has been made a bit darker like the Red Bull and has that similar finish, so they've definitely updated that a little bit in my opinion. For me, this is the biggest one. Aston Martin, of course, as you guys know, they had a complete side pod redesign, essentially copying the Red Bull. So you can see the new side pod is reflected in game with that kind of cut halfway down. Then we also have a lot more black. They basically blacked out the front wing very early on in the season. They also blacked out the rear wing, and they also brought in a bit of black on the end of the engine cover, essentially trying to save weight on paint, like what a lot of teams have done. Williams as well. There's a bit of black on the side pod. The halo is also black now, whereas it was green at the start of the season. And they have a bunch of new sponsors as well around the halo area, and I believe a slightly modified mirror as well. They've changed their mirrors a bit through the season. They've got that kind of cut out outside section to the actual mirror itself, and just some small adjustments here and there. But the Aston Martin, definitely one of the biggest changes in terms of the overall car presentation. And I believe their side pod also has moved back a lot, so their onboard is going to look a lot more different this year, so you might have to redo your settings for this car. Up next we have Williams, and again another team with the Red Bull style side pod like McLaren and also Aston Martin. So they were actually quite similar to Mercedes. They had basically no side pod before, but they've now got rid of that. We've got, of course, the updates to the livery, a bit more red prominent on the side pod as well, and the rear wing. Definitely small changes that they've made. Also some sponsors like Duracell coming on board, and yeah, just some small tweaks to the livery, I'd say. But the key thing here with them, and the only big thing really, is the side pod change. And yeah, the Williams looking actually a lot nicer, to be fair. I actually quite like how this car looks. I might actually pick it in league racing. It's a pretty smart car. I've always liked the livery this season, so big fan. Now, Alfa Romeo, I believe, is one of the few cars that I can't really see much of a visual change in terms of the overall car chassis. I want to say the side pod's changed, especially towards the back half. It's kind of got this slope falling down, which I don't recognise from before. Also, I feel like there's a bump on the nose, which is new. I've seen it in real life, and I don't think it was that noticeable before. I feel like they've made that bump on the nose where the Singer logo is a lot more pronounced. You can see it just really kind of dips in, dips out, and kind of falls back in again. Other than that, it's had a bit of an update to the livery, a bunch of new sponsors. You can see the nose section is absolutely full of them, and yeah, overall that's kind of the main thing with them. Finally, we have the Haas, which isn't, again, it frustrates me, it's not fully accurate because the wheels have been black the entire season. I don't know why Cody's have still got this, but the wheel covers are black, but the actual wheel rim is metallic, which it's never been at any point this season. It never was in pre-season, so I'll probably mod those in to make them black once again. The key things for Haas though, the big changes to side pod. They have that Ferrari style kind of U-shaped boat side pod, and they have a lot of black paint covering the kind of vents, which does kind of ruin the livery pretty much, but they're doing it for cooling purposes because I believe otherwise the paint would melt, so they have just, you know, special black paint, along with a few sponsors like the Haas tooling on the side pod, and then also on the side of the front wing, and just a general livery update. You can see a few sponsors, Transfer Mate coming in on the side, on the inside part of the wing, and yeah, the Haas looking a bit more complete with the sponsors in my opinion, and a bit more up to date with a few little winglets here and there as well. So yeah guys, that is it. That is your lot with all the car updates. It would have been nice to see some helmet updates like Russell's helmet. He hasn't used the black one in like 7 or 8 races now, which is a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. But we're going to test out the tyre allocation really quickly. Now in the rules and flags section, you're going to have the new immersive safety car, which, you know, was already there, but of course the delta adjustment, we'll test that out down the line with some actual races. But finally, the weekend tyre allocation is in this section now, and as you can see, 8 sets of softs, 3 sets of mediums, 2 sets of hards. It doesn't work exactly how I thought it would work in terms of, for example, if you go for balanced, you'd have X amount. If you went for harder, you'd have another set of mediums, or if you went for soft, you'd have another set of softs. It doesn't really work like that. It just changes the way the tyres are distributed for the weekend. So you can see for the race, no change in terms of the medium or the hard compound tyre. It all depends whether you go in qualifying what you go for. So if you go for the soft allocation, you're going to have just soft tyres in qualifying. If you go for balanced, you'll have one set of mediums for Q2. If you go for harder, you'll actually have a set of hard tyres available, I believe, the way I understand it, for qualifying. So that could be quite interesting, and you might see a lot of people use this in esports, I think, to give yourself a bit more option in terms of tyre compound. And dare I say, most people might try and get through Q1 on the mediums. It might just be like a medium tyre session, but that might be just pure speculation on my behalf. Either way, good to see. It's going to add some good versatility to the race weekends, and I'm keen to see how this affects, league racing, career modes, esports, all that stuff moving forward. And yeah, it would have been nice to have seen some more changes, like the Russell helmet. The Alpine race suits haven't been like this since, I think, round 4 or round 5. It's been a long time since they've kind of got rid of these, and I'm just looking through now, and I don't think they've changed any of the kind of helmets, suits, or anything like that. That's still exactly the same as before, which is a bit of a shame. You want to see those things also updated, as they are part of the game, but I can see there's just nothing changed at all. I think Schumacher said his helmet changed, but I think that's the only driver that I can visibly see that has had the update, because Mick started this season with like a blue and green helmet. Everybody else is the same. So yeah, a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. Alas, we'll take what we're given, I guess. So yeah, guys, as always, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and that was the latest patch. As always, a big shout out to the members for supporting the content. Finally, check out the 2 videos on screen if you haven't seen them already, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Until then, take care, and it's goodbye from me.